Good afternoon. I'm legendary videographer Jason Drake, and I've been a wedding videographer since 2005, a smartass since '94. And at every wedding I go to, all the vendors would be seated at the same table, and we'd swap stories, our crazy wedding stories. Every time I would tell my story, people would laugh. Inevitably, somebody would say, "Oh, they should write a book." Well, I did. You stay classy, wedding people. It's a collection of crazy wedding stories and what not to do for future brides. But I've read other wedding publications, and some of the stories are just depressing. And I didn't want to just regurgitate an event. I have to add my 2 cents to everything. I guess that's part of my upbringing, as I'm half Irish, half sarcastic on my mother's side. And so I just wanted this to be a fun, funny book. And there are a ton of jokes, plenty of pop culture references, because God forbid an event happens without me referencing a movie to it. There are way too many references to the Road Warrior than you think there would be in a book about crazy wedding stories. And it's also a learning tool. It's a what not to do. So that way when you have your wedding, it doesn't get ruined by things that are easily preventable. A couple story examples. A photographer and I were seated with the guests, and it was family-style dinner. And if you don't know, that's 4 or 5 plates of different kinds of foods, and everyone takes some and passes it along. So the photographer looks up and says, "Did everybody get enough?" And we all kind of look at him like, "Yeah." So he pulls out a bag of Tupperware and proceeds to fill his coffers. And we looked at him with that look of shock and surprise, like if somebody said Lena Dunham was a literary genius, that kind of look. And server comes over and server says, "Can I get anything else?" And he says, "Yeah, another plate of each." And sure enough, wow. And I told this story to a photographer once, and without knowing I was writing a book, he said, "Wow, that was classy." Wow. I said, yes, it was. The book is divided into categories. There's a chapter on DJs, churches, drunk guests. There's even an author screw-up chapter, a videographer chapter. And there's a special Zilla chapter. Most of the stories are about a page. It's a really short, quick read. But the Zilla chapter is about 10 to 12 pages. Because to get that honorary degree, you can't just do one thing. You have to do a lot. And the groomzilla of our story showed up at his church in a chauffeured Rolls Royce. And the bride was late. So the preacher and the 2 photographers and myself were outside on the steps of the church, waiting for the bride. 10 minutes after the scheduled start, pulls up this tiny little blue Nissan, being driven by the bride. So to reiterate, groom, chauffeured Rolls Royce, bride, self-driven, tiny little Nissan. And the sad part is that wasn't even in the top 5 of classless things this groom did that day. And so in addition to just telling stories, most of them, the format goes story, reference, joke, lesson. But when I get to things like scheduling and speeches, that's usually where weddings go off track. And these are things that are easily fixed. I just tell, do this, do this, do this, do this. Because people don't even think about these things. They schedule their wedding to the last minute. They don't account for little things that could throw it off schedule, like bad weather, traffic, Lena Dunham's giant ego affecting Earth's gravitational pull, little things like that. And with speeches, I've seen fathers get up there with 5 typed pages. They ramble on for 20 minutes. They get to their emotional moment, they get to their punchline, and nothing, no response. Because everyone tuned them out 12 minutes ago. Yep. It's like, get to your point. So another thing I suggest is try to limit your F-bombs to no more than 2 per speech. Doesn't quite go over as well as you think. So I know what some of you are thinking. Okay, great, you can tell us what not to do, but how do I write a good speech? Well, fear not, my young Padawans, I do that for you. All right. I outline the greatest speech ever written by me, and I'm able to set it up so you can retrofit it for yourself. Day is saved. Another wedding do is try to eat something during the day before you drink 8 shots of vodka.
Oh, man. Yeah, believe me, yeah.
Everyone's so worried about how all the plans, is this going to work? They don't think about that. And then you're at the ceremony and the best man does a face plant on the church steps because he didn't eat. All these people, they rushed to his aid and they carried him off the field. Ref said play on, and the church ceremony didn't stop. He was in the middle of a song and they just kept going. All the groomsmen took a step to the left and they went on. Anyway, so it's just a nice collection of comedy and lessons to learn. So that way when you have your special day, it's, like I said, it's not ruined. There's original illustrations, there's jokes in the credits, and
can you read something for us? Like something?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you read what you might perceive as like one of the funniest stories?
Sure. In the bride's hotel room, I was taking shots as she was getting ready. While the back of her dress was getting laced up, the maid of honor noticed food in the bride's teeth. And before you could say, "You're gonna what?" the dental floss was out, the bride opened wide, and the best maid was flossing full hamster style. And while I'm fully aware that full hamster style is a reference only my brother would get, it's my book and it fits, so I'm sticking to it. In a world where so many people freak out because of some minor faux pas, where only they and Joan Rivers would even notice it, it was refreshing to see someone do that for their best friend. I can barely floss myself, and I'm sure there are many people who would love to tell me to go floss myself. Thank you. The book has garnered a ton of press. I was in studio, WGN Morning News. I had a lot of radio appearances, WBBM News Radio. A couple weeks ago I was on the Mancow Show, and I was in studio guest for the Steve Cochran Show. I've had 11 newspapers do coverage on it, including the front page of the Daily Southtown, so it's, people like it. At least that's the way it sounds.
Now, I know you had a signing, maybe was it last year at Bradley?
Yeah.
So have you had anything recently?
The Mancow Show was a couple weeks ago. That was about it. I usually take the winter off because I'm cold.
What's that? You do the Macho Man one time?
Ooh, yeah, Randy Savage impression. Dig it, yeah.
Good deal, good deal. Tupperware guy. One reception hall was serving a family-style dinner. That means instead of getting your very own dinner, 5 plates of different kinds of food like chicken, roast beef, mashed potatoes, vegetables, pasta, etc. are served, and you take what you want and pass it along. I was seated with the photographer at a full guest table. After everyone took turns with the portions, the photographer very politely asked the entire table if we had enough, and everyone said yes. He then proceeds to pull out several Tupperware containers and starts dumping the remaining plates of food in them. The guests and I sat there dumbfounded with our mouths open and facial expressions of pure disbelief. You know, like if someone said Kanye West was a musical genius. Yeah, that kind of look. What's the phrase? In for an ounce, in for 12 pounds of chicken and mashed potatoes. Once he was done with the current plates of food, he asked the servers if they could bring one more plate of each food to our table. And yep, you guessed it, dumped 5 more full plates of food into his never-ending Tupperware bowl. And here, I've been scolded by hall managers for taking a couple of appetizers. How typical. I get yelled at for trying to get a couple table scraps so I don't pass out before dinner. Tiny violins playing. While Elvis is backing up the Pork Chop Express for all he can carry. I told this story to a photographer who did not know I was writing a book, let alone what the title was, and his first response was, "That's classy." Yes, it was. Yes, it is. Editor's note. The appetizer story is in the author's screw-up chapter. The author's screw-up chapter, which is the videographer's chapter. Wow. I probably should read it as you said it, but this is good though. But I see like the humor in this, yeah.